We are tonight's entertainment.
You can't handle the truth.
The fire rises.
Pizza time.
You're a wizard, Harry.
So it begins.
You know how much I sacrifice?
You think that's air you're breathing?
Groovy.
I don't have friends. I got family.
We are sex people! 1, 2, 3, 4!
Craft Services.
Hey, Trent.
Hi, Parth.
Good to see you.
It's good to see you, too. I think... Oh, you're looking well.
Thank you.
Hi. We have a film podcast.
Yeah. What have you been eating most recently?
You saw some of it happen. I just had some orange juice and some rye toast with butter. It's delicious and easy. What about you?
My dad was in India for the last 3 weeks because he had a wedding to go to, and then he stayed for his father's 83rd birthday. And then he since came home and has to go to New York for work. And so after one of his New York days, he brought home a classic glazed dozen of, can you guess it?
Of the Krispy Kreme donuts from the Penn Station Krispy Kreme?
You would be correct. Yeah, and there's already half of them are gone. Over half of them are gone.
It's because those things, it's like 3 or 4 bites and they vanish. And then it's like, am I really just going to have one? That was just sort of introducing the taste to my mouth. And then on the second one, you really hit your stride.
Yeah. Well, one time, Sophia and I went into New York and we got maybe a half dozen, and I ate 4 of them in front of her, like, so quickly. And she was amazed at my ability, because I'm also not somebody, I think, that eats
in bulk
so much, I think, in like a single setting. But I did feel a little sick after that, I'm remembering.
Yeah, my mom has a rule with donuts where it's like 1, you feel good, and then you think you can eat 2, and then after you eat the second one, you feel sick.
I can usually eat 2. It's the third that'll get you sick, for me.
I have been known to get 3 donuts from that Krispy Kreme and eat 2 or 3 on the train if my phone is dead and just really focus on eating 3 donuts.
But what I'd like for the audience to focus on now is this intro.
Welcome back to Craft Services, where we talk about the movies. Each week we talk about a film and hopefully have a crew member of that film to talk with us about their experience working on the picture. This week we did just that with cinematographer
Lol Crawley.
Lol Crawley, who has worked on a bunch of cool films that we're about to say in the intro, so I won't say them again. So just look out for them. But this week we're doing Brady Corbet's The Brutalist.
We were talking off air about how we thought this interview went pretty great.
Yeah, I'm on my new mic. So our audio setups are matched. Hopefully that's taking a step up. We're trying to be more in the moment with the questions. We try to shave down the questions that are less interesting and yield less interesting responses. We watch some interviews to get ready.
It took us 5 years, but I think we're finally a professional podcast.
Like, barely. And this is like, we're just starting to scratch the surface.
Yeah. As you told your father, the podcast has just gotten started.
So disregard everything before. But if you like this episode, not only will we see you next week for part 2, but come back every Sunday for forever. Maybe not forever. For the foreseeable future. And hear this quality, if not better.
But this is all stuff we'll get into in the outro, and we kind of want you to get to the outro, so why don't I cue the interview, Trent, unless you've got anything else you want to tell?
No, the only way to get to the outro is through listening to part 1 of the interview, so it's only natural.
Let's cue the interview. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our interview with Lol Crawley. He's the cinematographer behind such films as White Noise, The Humans, The Devil All the Time, and our film for today, and his third collaboration with director Brady Corbet, The Brutalist. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
So just to start off, could you just talk a little bit about when you decided that you wanted to be a cinematographer and how you sort of broke into the industry?
Yeah, I mean, it's whenever you look back at these things, I think you see them slightly differently. I mean, for me, it was an evolution from art to photography and photography to moving image. I'm talking sort of at school and then through through to university, But even as a kid, I remember growing up. I grew up in Wales in the countryside, and I remember this may mean nothing, but I do remember sort of like looking at the world through a kind of like closed up fist at one point, almost like a kind of telescope, as a kind of rudimentary kind of viewfinder. So, and I had a real passion for films and for watching films. I didn't, I wasn't sort of making short films on Super 8 or anything like that, but it really was a kind of an evolution. And then I went to film school with the intention of directing, I think, when I was young, when I was kind of 19, because I didn't really understand the other facets and the other roles within the industry. And then I was lucky enough to meet producer director team there, Dwayne Hopkins and Sam Haley. And then I shot their graduation film, and then came out pretty much sort of told myself that I wanted to be a cinematographer or that I was going to be a cinematographer, I suppose, rather arrogantly, and then worked my way up through the camera departments whilst shooting short films. And then I got a lucky break with a film called Ballast that went to Sundance in 2008. And that was my journey up until the origins of becoming a cinematographer.
So The Brutalist is your third collaboration now with Brady Corbet, and we were wondering how the two of you were first introduced.
So my agent at Lux in the UK, Rebecca Fayed, she introduced me. Brady didn't have a DP; he needed a DP for childhood, and we got on a call, much like this. And within 2 hours, I sort of felt like we had a lovely 2-hour conversation, and Mona was there, and Ada, their babe in arms at the time, who's now like 11, I think. It's been quite a journey. I think within a couple of hours we were like, let's do it. That's certainly how I felt, and it was a very, very great introduction and an easy introduction. Brady was, from the very initial point of meeting him and certainly being on set with him, I realized what an assured filmmaker he was right from the very beginning.
And as I understand it, you first were involved with The Brutalist kind of right after you guys collaborated on Vox Lux, maybe around 2018 or so. Can you talk about getting involved with The Brutalist specifically and what that pre-production period looked like for you?
Yeah, I mean, my collaboration with Brady is one of those rare things that we all hope for, which is that you work with the director maybe once, twice, and then it's like, we'll do another one, and hopefully it happens. Sometimes it doesn't, for whatever reason. My collaboration with Brady, as you alluded to, basically at the end of Vox Lux, he gave me a book on brutalist architecture and said, "This is the next one." And as anyone who works with other creative people know, that's what you kind of strive for, that trust, that relationship. And it was, it was great. It was a real honor to be kind of invited into these things. So from that point, there was a bit of a longer gestation period than planned due to COVID and various other factors. So over that time, we really just exchanged ideas, photographs, paintings, film references, architectural references, discussions about how you take the moving image and apply it to a media, to an art form that is essentially static and inert, like architecture. So really about how we were going to move the camera through the space, and format choice and lens choice and movement and composition, really.
So how The Brutalist is obviously, I think, nearing 3.5 hours, and has a 15-minute intermission. How does the length of the film, does it affect your approach at all? Like, if at the start they were like, The Brutalist is going to be 95 minutes in the look, does that affect how you go about your process?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I'd start by saying that everybody was aware of the length of the script, and there was an intermission built into the script. So that was very sort of explicit. So everybody knew what they were signing up to. It's interesting. I mean, I suppose in terms of pacing, when there are scenes like Laszlo arriving in New York, Adrian Brody's character arriving to America for the first time, and you have this long, fairly long scene where you're sort of emerging from the bowels of a ship out into this kind of ascendancy onto the top deck of the ship as he is kind of spat out into the New York harbor and to the, essentially the promise, the immigrant promise of America. I think if you take a scene like that, it's unapologetic in the kind of length of time it takes to tell that story. So I suppose the whole approach is in some way imbued with this understanding, of the length of time that things are going to take. But it didn't necessarily, I don't remember being conscious of it affecting my approach other than that.
Bringing up that opening shot, which is really amazing. I read that you and Brady are sort of reticent to storyboard or shot list because you don't want to be super locked in to that. That's such an amazing opening shot. And I just wanted to see if you could talk about designing that and just because it's an amazing shot.
Yo, thank you. Yeah, so essentially, the process is that I arrive in Budapest a little after Judy Becker, our designer, and our location scout and the director. They've already been on the ground, had a little, had a trip to Budapest, scouting locations. So they'd seen the ship and they'd pretty much locked the ship. In fact, I think they'd 100% locked the ship before I saw it. I was a little alarmed because there wasn't much going on in the ship. There wasn't really anywhere to hide. What I mean by that is it was literally a ship that was moored on the Danube, and it was in the process of becoming a nightclub, like one of those floating nightclubs. So really, it was kind of like a very theatrical space, and I think that was my concern, because the plan was not to do a huge amount of design in there. The idea was that they wanted me in the photography to create a space that was very sort of dark and confusing and disorientating for Laszlo to wake up into. So the shot begins with Adrian lying on the floor, being woken up in a dark space, reminiscent of the sort of the camps of Dachau. I mean, many audiences have told me they thought that's where we were at the beginning of that moment. And then it evolves as we're sort of like, the design that Judy did put in place and her team were these kind of bunk beds that lined his passage up to the upper decks, as it were. And then we had sort of dancers and we choreographed the sequence. So essentially I'm following with a handheld camera that I'm operating. I'm following Adrian, and then people are passing between the camera and Adrian and in front of Adrian. And it's very dark. And occasionally Adrian's just being caught in these kind of carefully placed spotlights that we use. And the problem that I had was that when you're lighting a space like that, if the more lights you put in, the more ambient light is kicking around, and just generally the ambient light lifts and you get to see the whole space. So what you're trying to do is just try to put as much of it in shadows, much of the location in shadows, and then, just highlight those little moments. And then, so it's a handheld shot that follows Adrian all the way through passages and compartments of the ship. And then we sort of ascend up these stairs, and I'm literally pulling myself with a 235 35mm camera, pulling myself up with one hand. Like the steps on a ship are very steep, so I'm hand holding it and pulling myself up. And then we follow Adrian out, and then there's this kind of celebratory moment where he's on the deck, and it's kind of like this kind of transcendental moment, and we whip pan up to something that we see in the harbor, and then it turns out to be the sort of tumbling depiction of the Statue of Liberty,
So you mentioned you operating the camera, and we read that you, correct us if we're wrong, did all the operating except for the Steadicam. And we're wondering, is that unusual for cinematographers to do their own operating nowadays? Was it a practicality? How does that work?
Well, I grew up in the UK. The tradition in Europe and the UK is to generally do one's own operating. Well, that's certainly what I was doing. Cinematographers like Roger Deakins, I know, likes to operate himself. Robbie Ryan, Christopher Doyle, Anthony Dodmantle, people that I sort of grew up with and were kind of heroes of mine. I feel it's very important to be at the sharp end. I'm a cinematographer who really embraces composition and camera movement, possibly over lighting. You know, I mean, I obviously light, and there's a lot of lighting going on in this movie. But for me, certainly with the handheld scenes as well, I feel there's a very important interplay between the camera and the performer, between the actor and capturing that performance. I just really like to be at the sharp end. I couldn't really imagine spending my time just in a kind of DIT tent while someone's operating outside. That's just not the way I like to work. As you know, in the US and the UK, it's very different. In the US, there is a union stipulation to have an operator on board. And a lot of the time that makes perfect sense. The bigger the project, the bigger the necessity. I mean, you know, White Noise, for example, was incredibly ambitious in many sequences. And I had a Erin Henning, wonderful operator that I work with. It makes no sense for me to try and light and then, you know, the director's asking to see an image and I'm running between the camera and lighting. It's just, in some instances, it makes no sense to just spread yourself too thinly, you know?
Yeah, and talking about, I mean, one of the big selling points of the movie is the VistaVision format and presentation. Was that always the intention going in, is that you were going to do that? And obviously this is a lower budgeted film, but I've also read that you've said that like the narrative around film being so expensive for lower budget films is a little, it's just maybe not true. Was that a struggle to justify that, and what using that format brought you on set that maybe shooting 35 or even digital wouldn't?
Sure. Well, I've shot 12 movies on film out of all the films I've ever shot. I think I counted up the other day. It was 12 on celluloid. So I'm very, very lucky to be able to do that. And I'm also been very lucky in that a lot of those projects, Devil All the Time for Antonio, 45 Years, all 3 films for Brady, it hasn't been an argument I've had to try and win. You know, I've come on board those projects and it's been 35 mil from the beginning, you know. So in that sense, I'm very lucky. And yes, to be completely blunt, I don't think it is true. I'm, you know, this idea of, you know, sure, I did the maths recently on a film that unfortunately we didn't get to shoot film. We didn't have the support to shoot film, but we crunched the numbers and it was an $8 million movie and it was $200,000 more to shoot film. And we could easily have achieved it. We just didn't, you know, there weren't enough people involved in the film that wanted to do it. So it was a big shame. 45 Years was, you know, maybe $1.5 million or something. And we shot Panavision 35. It's possible. And I hope people realize that. I mean, not every film has to be shot 35 mil or even 16. And Brady would be the first to say this also. But I think what Brady and I slightly resent is this idea of having economics driving restricting our palette, you know? And I think everybody feels that way, you know? Yeah, we just want the opportunity to be able to continue doing that. And we're hoping that the success of the movie is going to allow people to see that it's possible. Coming back to your question, I mean, Brady's always wanted to, you know, we've always shot 35. Brady's always wanted to explore larger formats. And then early on, when we were talking, he suggested the idea of VistaVision. He felt that it was appropriate for a film that was largely set in the 50s to be shot on a camera system from that time, which made a lot of sense. And also the fact that we have it's called VistaVision, and we have these amazing vistas, not only where the institute that Laszlo designed is being built, but also the Carrara marble quarries in the latter part of the film or the second half of the film. So it made perfect sense that we would use this format for that. And I think, it very much earns its place. And I think it does very well to challenge any suggestion of kind of affectation or anything like that. I think when you see the film, it makes perfect sense why we chose VistaVision.
With a movie of this length, it might be hard to identify, but before you started shooting, were there any sort of priorities or goals or rules, like with the look, you wanted to be consistent throughout the whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. So initially, Brady was talking about this, when we were just, in sort of soft pre-production, he was talking aesthetically about this idea of the film having some sort of archival quality. and almost kind of like a patchwork aesthetic, which, I was trying to wrap my head around, because in many ways, DPs are trying to avoid ideas of sort of something feeling like patchwork, because that feels inconsistent. The whole idea of doing a DI is that you're spending weeks on end making sure everything is consistent. That it all feels like it's happening at the same point. But I think Brady was really just talking about the idea of not being afraid of certain inconsistencies and different feels to the movie. Or like, for example, there's some second unit work that Adam Follen's DP shot of Laszlo sort of constructing furniture and things, that's shot almost in this kind of Frederick Wiseman handheld 16 mil kind of aesthetic, And then, of course, we had the VistaVision, and then we have other elements on 35 where the VistaVision just wasn't a compatible camera to use. For example, the ship sequence, it was just too big to handhold. But I think with all of that taken into account, I do feel that the film has a sort of cohesive quality. I mean, one thing we didn't want to do, we didn't ever speak about, okay, so, he arrives in America at the end of the 40s, and it's going to feel like this, and then the 50s is going to feel like this, and then this is going to feel like this. The only thing that feels radically different to me, I think, is at the end, which is a big jump to 1980,
right,
at the Biennale in Venice, and of course we shoot that on sort of Betacam, but we also intercut that with VistaVision, so the VistaVision still has a place in the film in that moment. I think it helps to tie it in, and still keeps that film aesthetic in there, But yeah, those were the kind of like initial conversations, and I think there's an unofficial sort of trilogy going on here between the three films. They're all period films. They sort of, some of the grammar within the films, the language does kind of reflect one another. Like the bus journey to Philadelphia kind of echoes the opening scene of Vox Lux grammatically. So I think that, and it's unapologetic and intentional in that regard. And all three films explore similar themes. It's all a study of a central character that's fictitious and is in some way becomes a kind of cultural icon. I think we approach this movie with a shorthand. I mean, Brady and I have always had a similar aesthetic taste. I mean, I think that's what drew him to me in the first place. And so there's not a lot of contradiction on set. There's not a lot of discussion about the lighting necessarily, other than I try to light the space and allow the actors to move within that. I think lighting wise, we often do this thing where we're quite naturalistic, and then Brady will want these kind of very elevated moments of light and unmotivated light. So I come from a tradition of sort of motivated naturalistic light sources, and then we'll pepper it with these kind of like transcendental kind of moments, or these kind of like these, like, for example, in Vox Lux, I think there's a moment with Stacey Martin's character where she's being fired, I think, and then Brady wanted this lens flare like coming from completely out of nowhere, and then in this film, in The Brutalist, at the end of the movie, where they're searching for Guy Pearce's character Van Buren, there's a moment where we see finally see the light coming through in the form of a cross, like a gobo, and forming a cross on the altarpiece. So something like that would be impossible to achieve naturally. It would be given the distance of where the cross is in relation to the altarpiece, for example. So things like that are very elevated and heightened. So for us, it's a balance between these two things.
Jumping back a little bit to what you were talking about before, I didn't realize there was a second unit crew. I mean, it makes sense just given the enormity of the movie. Is that something you've worked with before and are comfortable with? I think the movie does have a very cohesive feel to it. So can you just talk about having to sort of command, a section of the shoot that you're not going to be there for?
Yeah, I don't enjoy it. I'm a control freak.
Sure.
Luckily, we had Mona Fassbold directing it, and we had Adam Follen shooting it. So I could not have been have asked for a better director DP team. But no, at the end of the day, would I want to control every image in the movie? Absolutely, 100%. And I do that as much as I can, but it's just the nature of it. It's a 33-day shoot. It's around a $10 million budget or something like that. It's just impossible. And I'm incredibly grateful to have had that crew and have Mona being able to achieve that for us.
Just hearing the number 33 days is pretty insane.
It might have been 34. I might have got it wrong.
Well, if it's 34, then it must be easy.
I heard you were shooting 7 or more pages a day, which is a lot. I heard in your Variety interview something about the location in the mine with like all the lights down the center, and that you just sort of stumbled upon that location and you were like, we need to shoot something here. And I was wondering, are there any sort of other examples through the movie of happy accidents or locations you stumbled upon, or sort of having to pivot and it may be working in your best interest?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think it comes back to this idea ties into the earlier question of storyboarding and shot listing. Even though we prepare a lot, Brady and I we're not collaborators who like to do a lot of shot listing and storyboarding. The only storyboarded sequence in the film is with the dome, which by necessity it had stunt performers, it had SFX, it had VFX, so a lot of moving parts. It's not how we prefer to work. So coming back to your question, essentially, even though we prepare a lot and have very definite ideas about how a scene is covered and shot, and we have to, because there's no way we could have achieved it in the time we had if we weren't prepared. But at the same time, we like to be very open and responsive. We like to have one foot in almost in the documentary, in the sense of being able to respond to a performance, being able to respond to a space. I think that's what, I personally think that's what keeps a certain life to the films that I make with Brady, keeps a certain energy within it, a certain vitality. Sometimes if you kind of like storyboard stuff or shot list it or try to then enforce something that you came up with in a room 2 weeks before, it doesn't feel correct. It can feel stale. It can feel enforced. I think we're intuitive, instinctive sort of practitioners. That's the way that I think that we respond. And so to your point, like in this idea of responding to a space, right? So if you take the party scene at Carrera that you mentioned, Brady and Judy showed me that space. They'd found it. They were like, this is where we want to shoot. And then they were like, you have to respect, well, okay, they're not asking me to then light this space completely differently. They found this space because they like the way it feels. So my job in that instance is, how do we then find a way of translating that onto camera? How do we expose a very dark space? How do we capture that on film? So really, I wasn't, other than the section with Guy, that's quite different. We, for those that haven't seen the film, it's a handheld sequence. Almost kind of like, I always think of it, and it's almost like a sort of Fellini-esque moment in these Italian Carrera mines where Adrian is having this flirtatious, drunken dance with this young woman, and then it cuts to Guy Pearce's character, kind of like voyeuristically staring down at him, which is much more formal, locked off camera, much more lighting, in that scene, or it doesn't look overlit, but there's much more modeling and shaping of the light. And so really, a lot of that space, it was just like, okay, how do I protect it? So I just kind of like swapped out it was lit with incandescent bulbs, just literally like a daisy chain of bulbs. And so I just swapped those out with higher wattage bulbs, like photo floods and things. And then my gaffer, Attila Dozzi, installed 3 large lights coming through the ceiling that you don't really feel. They just basically allows me to light the space and allow the actors to then inhabit the space. And I definitely remember at the time being nervous. Any time that you're on the edge of exposure and things and at the mercy of you're not putting marks down for the actors. They could disappear into the shadows at any time. There's a certain, there's a certain negotiation that has to happen with those scenes. But yeah, I definitely remember thinking, it was definitely one of those scenes that was kind of on the edge exposure wise. So I was doing a lot of push processing and things like that.
What an interview.
Yeah, that was fun. Does one of your parents ever, after we do an interview, are they like, what'd you learn? And you're like pretty like, I'm like pretty dead inside. I don't know.
I usually record, I know you record usually in your bedroom, but I record, so I feel like whenever you're done recording, I can only assume you just like lay down on your bed and just like, ugh. But whenever I record, it's in the basement. And usually my family's in the family room, and I go up with my laptop and my charger, and then they're like, how'd it go? And I'm just like, can't talk. It's so draining to do an interview. Not the fault of the guest or anything. It's just where you're constantly having to keep track of the interview, the question list, making sure your audio is still recording, making sure you're not sounding stupid, making sure the connection is still good.
It's hard to juggle all those things.
Yeah, yes, you're really doing a lot.
No fault of our great guests, including Lol Crawley, and no fault of our parents for asking us that nice question. But
they
I
take an
can't
interest
help
in
but
our
feel
podcast.
like a kid being asked what I learned today at school, and the instinct to be an asshole about it never goes away.
When your parents picked you up, especially I feel like my mom, and they'd be like, "So how was your day at school?" And I just fucking hated them. Like I just like was like, I can't answer this. Stop. Just stop. Stop.
Shut up!
Stop. Go see Shazam 2. Just stop. Okay.
It's we're the family. We're the whole family he's talking about.
Yeah.
Parth and I were talking about that off air. We don't mean to inject that, even though I'll be bringing it up in all future episodes.
The hierarchy of power in craft services has changed with this episode. I hope our audience are people that are clued into these things, or this is just total nonsense. But
Parth had to explain to me that that's a Black Adam reference, or a Black Adam like promo, or
Dwayne The Rock Johnson
reference.
just constantly talking about how the hierarchy of power in the DC universe was about to change. But I guess it did. It did.
I saw a graphic on social media. I'm sure you may have seen it, but it was like the Red One budget broken down with like the whole year's slate of A24 films.
Yeah.
Where
how many was it? Like how many A24 movies were we able to make for the budget?
Oh, like 22 or something.
That's chill.
And they yielded more money than Red One, if you can even believe it. Civil War did.
The Red One budget.
There was a lot of great A24 movies that were like losing money on that list.
I mean, who could have predicted that Red One would have been a bad investment? There was just no way to know.
To tell a quick fun story.
Oh yeah.
We were at a drone event trying to make some quick cash, and it was like
where you
set up
the drones. It was very cold. It was very cold.
And we were hiding in the car for a lot of the day because we sort of learned we could get away with that.
Well, also, to be fair, after you set up the drones and put them on the field, there is literally nothing to do. There's actually nothing to do. And they called us there at 11, and the show didn't start until 7.
Yeah, we weren't hiding from our responsibilities. And at a certain point, we were like, we kind of think we could leave and come back, and it'd be fun to see a movie, but the only real movie that was playing that we hadn't seen was Red One, and we thought it's not worth it to jeopardize a day's wages
payment
to see Red One, a movie we don't even want to see.
And it's like 2.5 hours or something. If there was like a good 90-minute movie playing, then we could have gone. I mean, I think Y2K was playing too.
I was just
like
gonna
an
say that,
time
but I
or
think
something.
I think you were like, I told Sophia I'm gonna see it with her.
Yeah, which she ended up not seeing it. I saw it on my own.
Imagine my surprise. Sophia not wanting to see a studio comedy, made by SNL people.
Yeah, that's just really all the things that maybe aren't for her. But we hope this interview was for you, and if it was, there's even more coming out next week.
Yeah, quick thanks again to Lol Crawley and your team. Thanks for setting this up. You're a great guest, and we'll talk to you again next week.
On any of your major podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Pandora, anywhere you get your podcasts, we're there.
Yeah, you can rate us 5 stars, write a review on wherever you get your podcast, blah. And then you can find us on social media, Instagram, Twitter, and wherever you do your social media-ing. Is TikTok getting shut down quickly? What's going on
Well,
there?
the day that this comes out, which is tomorrow, TikTok's U.S. services, they're going to shut them down. So today's the last day. We never got on TikTok, and we may never get on TikTok again. Unless Trump reverses the executive order, or does an executive order that reverses the TikTok ban decision, and then maybe it'll happen again. I mean, I think it won't shut down ultimately, but...
Yeah, me neither. That's like...
I mean, I think it'll
shocking
shut
to
down
hear.
and then come back. But, like, I don't know...
You want to know what's going to happen? It's going to come back stronger than ever.
Yeah, I mean,
we're
with a new administration, I think America's in for the hierarchy of power. The U.S. government is about to change.
We're making a martyr out of TikTok. Do you think this is a conspiracy where Trump was like, what do the people care about most? TikTok. So I have the Supreme Court take that away just so I can give it back to them, give them something they already had, and then I will be a hero.
I don't think it was as...
Mic drop.
I don't think it was as planned out, like from the beginning as that, but, you know, he's very good at creating a problem and then solving that problem, quote unquote, that he created and then getting credit for it. Very Syndrome-esque of him. But when everyone's super, no one is.
Let's end on that note. We'll see you next week.
See you guys. Bye.